The great hall stretched before Sarah Chen like a cathedral made of stars. Alien beings from across the galaxy filled the floating platforms, their strange forms casting shadows in the blue light. Some had wings like crystal, others walked on tentacles, and a few glowed with their own inner fire. But all of them stared at her with the same look in their eyes. They thought she was nothing. Sarah stood alone at the center of the Galactic Tribunal. Her simple blue uniform looked plain next to the fancy robes and armor of the alien representatives. She was the only human in a room full of creatures who could live for thousands of years and cross space with their minds. Yet she kept her back straight and her chin up. The Zephyrian War Prime rose from his throne. HFY was 12 feet tall, covered in crystal plates that caught the light like a living diamond. His forearms moved with deadly grace and his red eyes burned with ancient power. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Humans," he said, making the word sound like an insult. "Your species has existed for what, 200,000 years? We Zephyrians have ruled this galaxy for 10 million. You have barely learned to leave your own star system. Yet you dare to refuse our generous offer of protection." Sarah felt the weight of every alien gaze upon her. Behind HFY stood the other Zephyrian lords, their crystal armor gleaming. She had studied them for months, learning their ways, their weaknesses, their pride. That pride would be their downfall. "Protection," Sarah repeated, her voice clear and steady. "Is that what you call the slavery of entire worlds? The destruction of any species that refuses to bow down to you?" The hall erupted in hissing, clicking, and roaring sounds as different aliens expressed their shock. No one spoke to the Zephyrians this way. Not if they wanted to live. HFY's laugh was like breaking glass. "Look at her, council members. This tiny creature thinks she can challenge us. Humans are weak. Their bodies break easily. Their minds are slow. They live such short lives that they cannot learn true wisdom. They are nothing but clever animals." A snake-like alien from the Serpentis Empire raised its head. "The War Prime speaks truth. Humans have no psychic powers, no energy weapons built into their bodies, no ability to survive in space without machines. They are the weakest species ever to reach the stars." "Indeed," agreed a floating jellyfish creature whose voice came from all directions at once. "My people have studied them. Their brains are primitive. They cannot even share thoughts like civilized beings. How can such creatures hope to stand against the might of Zephyria?" Sarah listened to them tear apart her species with cold analysis. They listed every human weakness, every limitation, every reason why Earth should surrender. They were right about most of it. Humans were weak compared to them. Humans were slow. Humans did live short lives. But they missed the most important thing about humans. They always did. "You're right," Sarah said, her words cutting through the alien chatter like a blade. "We are all those things, weak, slow, short-lived. That's exactly why you should be afraid of us." The hall fell silent. Even HFY seemed surprised. Sarah stepped forward. "You've conquered 1,000 worlds. You've destroyed entire civilizations. You've never lost a single battle in 10 million years. And now you're afraid of one little planet full of weak, slow, short-lived humans. Why is that?" HFY's crystal plates began to glow with anger. "We fear nothing, least of all your pathetic species." "Then prove it," Sarah said. "I invoke the right of single combat according to the ancient laws of this tribunal. One of yours against one of ours. Winner takes all." The alien representatives began talking all at once. The right of single combat was an old law, older than the Zephyrian Empire itself. It came from the first days of the Galactic Council, when disputes were settled by individual champions rather than fleet battles. No one had used it in thousands of years. A being made of living stone spoke up. "The law still stands. It cannot be refused if properly invoked." HFY's four eyes narrowed. "You would stake the fate of your entire species on single combat? How wonderfully stupid. Very well, human. I accept your challenge. I will choose our greatest warrior to face your best champion." "No need to choose," Sarah said. "I am Earth's champion." The laughter that followed shook the great hall. Aliens of every type and shape found the idea hilarious. A single human woman, barely 5.5 feet tall, challenging the warrior elite of the Zephyrian Empire. It was the best joke they had heard in centuries. HFY wiped tears from his crystal face. "You? A lone female with no enhancements, no psychic powers, no energy weapons? Oh, this will be delicious. I choose Vexthal the Destroyer as our champion." The name sent a chill through the assembly. Even the aliens who had been laughing fell silent. Vexthal was a legend of death and destruction. He had never lost a battle in 300 years. He had killed beings that could move mountains with their minds and creatures that could survive the heart of a star. Vexthul has destroyed armies single-handedly, Kethvar continued. He has torn apart battleships with his bare hands. He once fought for 7 days straight without rest against the combined champions of the Void Realm. And you, little human, think you can face him? Sarah nodded. I do. Then you will die magnificently, Kethvar said. The combat will take place in 3 days, in the Arena of Stars. The entire galaxy will watch as humanity's foolish pride leads to its destruction. As the tribunal dissolved into excited chatter about the upcoming spectacle, Sarah stood quietly in the center of the chaos. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people who were counting on her. She thought about her daughter, who would grow up either free or in chains depending on what happened in 3 days. Most of all, she thought about what the aliens couldn't understand. They saw humans as weak because they measured strength in all the wrong ways. They counted psychic power and energy weapons and crystal armor. They never counted heart. They never counted the refusal to give up. They never counted the human ability to find a way when there was no way. In 3 days, they would learn the difference. A small alien that looked like a walking flower approached her. Commander Chen, it whispered. Surely you cannot believe you can win. Vexthul is unstoppable, Sarah smiled. That's what everyone keeps telling me. But you know what? Nobody's ever been unstoppable when they faced a human who had nothing left to lose. As she walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast hall, Sarah began planning. Not for victory, because victory seemed impossible. She planned for something much more important. She planned to show the galaxy what humans really were. 3 days. 3 days to prove that being underestimated was the most dangerous mistake any enemy could make. The greatest show in galactic history was about to begin. The Arena of Stars floated in the emptiness between solar systems, a perfect sphere of transparent metal that let the galaxy watch from every angle. Inside, the gravity generators created an Earth-like environment, though the air tasted strange and metallic. Sarah Chen stood at one entrance, looking across the 100-meter diameter space at the opposite door where her opponent would emerge. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds had tuned in to watch what they expected to be the shortest fight in galactic history. The betting markets had already closed. The odds against Sarah were so high that most gambling houses refused to take bets on her winning. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, the announcer's voice boomed across space in 1,000 different languages. Welcome to the most anticipated combat in 10,000 years. Today, the fate of humanity hangs in the balance. Sarah adjusted her armor one last time. It was good armor, the best Earth could make, but it looked like a child's toy compared to what was coming. Her weapons were simple too. A plasma rifle, a metal sword, some grenades, and a few other tools that the aliens had dismissed as primitive junk. The crowd noise from the viewing stations grew louder as the opposite door began to open. Steam poured out, followed by heavy footsteps that shook the arena floor. Vexthul the Destroyer stepped into the light. Sarah had seen pictures, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. He stood 12 feet tall, his body a nightmare fusion of organic flesh and mechanical perfection. His left arm was a massive cannon that hummed with deadly energy. His right hand ended in claws that could cut through starship hulls. His legs were reinforced with hydraulic systems that let him jump incredible distances or kick through concrete walls. But it was his face that made Sarah's blood run cold. Once, long ago, he might have been handsome by Zephyrian standards. Now half his head was metal and wires with a red cybernetic eye that glowed like a coal. The organic half still showed intelligence, but it was the intelligence of a predator that had never known defeat. The crowd roared as Vexthul raised his cannon arm and fired a practice shot at one of the arena's practice targets. The metal dummy didn't just explode. It turned to vapor, leaving nothing behind but a few scattered atoms. Impressive, said the announcer. Vexthul's plasma cannon can generate temperatures of 50,000 degrees. His cybernetic enhancements give him the strength of 20 warriors and reflexes faster than thought itself. Sarah watched Vexthul stretch and warm up. Every movement was perfectly calculated, showing off his power for the watching galaxy. He moved like a machine, but a machine that enjoyed killing. And now, the announcer continued, his opponent, Commander Sarah Chen of Earth, height 5 feet 6 inches, weight 140 pounds, no cybernetic enhancements, No psychic abilities. No energy weapons integrated into her biology. Weapons include a standard plasma rifle, a metal blade, and various small explosives. The laughter from the viewing stations was so loud it echoed even in the vacuum around the arena. Sarah heard alien voices placing last-minute bets on how many seconds she would survive. 10 seconds, clicked one voice. 5, hissed another. I say 3. The first shot will turn her to ash. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her training, about every human who had ever fought against impossible odds. She thought about David facing Goliath, about 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, about every underdog who had ever refused to quit. Combatants, prepare, the announcer called. Bexthul turned his attention to Sarah for the first time. His red eye focused on her with mechanical precision, probably analyzing her weak points and planning the fastest way to kill her. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding metal. Little human, he said, I will make this quick. You have courage to face me, so I grant you a warrior's death. Sarah looked up at the massive killing machine and smiled. That's very kind of you, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline. Vexthul's organic eye showed confusion. Decline? The warrior's death, Sarah explained, checking her weapons one more time. See, I didn't come here to die like a warrior. I came here to win like a human. Before Vexthul could ask what that meant, the starting signal echoed through the arena. Vexthul moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. His cannon arm swung toward Sarah, energy already building for a shot that would end the fight instantly. But Sarah was already gone. She had thrown herself sideways the moment before the signal, rolling behind one of the arena's obstacles. The plasma bolt that would have vaporized her instead struck the wall, leaving a glowing crater in the metal. Impossible, someone in the crowd whispered. No organic being can move that fast. But Sarah wasn't trying to be faster than Vexthul. She was just trying to be somewhere else when he fired. It was a human trick, one that no alien had ever learned. Prediction. Reading body language. Guessing what an enemy would do before they did it. Vexthul's second shot missed too, and his third. Each time, Sarah seemed to know where he would aim before he aimed there. She moved like water, flowing around his attacks instead of trying to meet them head-on. She's running, snorted Kethvar from his viewing box. Typical human cowardice. But some of the older aliens in the crowd were starting to look worried. This wasn't random running. Sarah moved with purpose, using every piece of cover in the arena, always staying just out of range of Vexthul's massive claws. Stand still and fight, Vexthul roared, his mechanical voice showing the first hints of frustration. Sarah popped up from behind a barrier and fired her plasma rifle. The shot struck Vexthul in the shoulder, making him stagger but not doing any real damage. His armor was too strong, but that wasn't the point. Fight? Sarah called back, already moving to a new position. This is fighting. Human style. She fired again, this time at his feet. The shot scattered metal fragments that made him stumble. A third shot hit his cannon arm, not penetrating but throwing off his next attack. Vexthul was getting angry now. He had expected to end this in seconds, but the tiny human kept dancing away from his shots. Worse, she was starting to annoy him with her weak weapons. Your weapons cannot hurt me, he snarled. Good thing I'm not trying to hurt you yet, Sarah replied. She was studying him, learning his patterns, every shot he fired, every step he took, every time he turned his head. Vexthul was incredibly powerful, but he was also predictable. His cybernetic parts made him faster and stronger, but they also made him think like a machine. And Sarah had spent her whole life learning how to break machines. The crowd was getting restless. This wasn't the quick slaughter they had expected. Some were even starting to cheer for the underdog, though they still expected her to lose eventually. But in the War Prime's viewing box, Kethvar was no longer laughing. He was watching Sarah move, and for the first time in his long life, he was starting to understand why humans had survived long enough to reach the stars. They were survivors. And survivors always found a way to turn weakness into strength. Sarah fired another shot, this one at a specific joint in Vexthul's knee armor. It didn't penetrate, but it made him limp slightly on his next step. What are you doing? Vexthul demanded. Sarah smiled as she reloaded her rifle. Learning. The arena had fallen strangely quiet. What should have been over in seconds had stretched into minutes, and Sarah Chen was still alive. More than alive. She was making Vexthul look clumsy. The great destroyer stumbled again as another of Sarah's shots hit the damaged joint in his knee. His plasma cannon swung wildly, missing her by meters as she rolled behind a different piece of cover. The crowd watched in growing amazement as the unstoppable killing machine began to show signs of wear. "This is impossible," muttered a tentacled alien in the viewing stands. "She should be dead 10 times over." But Sarah wasn't just surviving. She was learning everything about her opponent. Each attack showed her something new. The slight delay between his cannon shots, the way his cybernetic eye tracked targets, the joint in his armor that sparked when he moved too fast. Most importantly, she was learning about his mind. Vexthul fought like a machine because that's what he had become. 300 years of victory had taught him that overwhelming force solved every problem. He had never needed to adapt, never needed to think beyond point and shoot. He was a hammer looking for nails, and Sarah refused to be a nail. "Stand still, coward," Vexthul roared, his voice showing more frustration than any Zephyrian warrior should ever display. Sarah emerged from cover, but instead of running away, she ran straight at him. The move was so unexpected that Vexthul hesitated for a crucial second. By the time he brought his cannon to bear, she had already slid between his legs and was behind him. Her sword, that primitive metal blade the aliens had mocked, sliced across the cables connecting his cannon arm to his power source. Sparks flew. Vexthul's mighty weapon sputtered and died. The arena erupted in shocked gasps from 1,000 different species. In 3 centuries of combat, no one had ever damaged Vexthul's primary weapon. "Lucky shot," snarled Kethvar from his viewing box, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Vexthul spun around, his clawed hand swiping at where Sarah had been. But she was already gone, rolling away and coming up with a grenade in her hand. Not a big one. Not powerful enough to seriously hurt something like Vexthul, but powerful enough for her purposes. She threw it not at Vexthul, but at the ceiling above him. The explosion brought down a shower of metal debris. None of it would have bothered Vexthul normally, but one piece struck the damaged joint in his knee at just the right angle. The hydraulic system that powered his leg gave a grinding whine and locked up. Suddenly, the destroyer who could leap across the arena like a grasshopper could barely walk. "You're cheating," Vexthul accused, his mechanical voice distorting with damage to his systems. Sarah paused in her movement, actually looking hurt by the accusation. "Cheating? I'm using the environment to my advantage. I'm adapting my tactics to exploit your weaknesses. I'm thinking instead of just hitting things really hard. If that's cheating, then every human who ever lived was a cheater." She fired her rifle again, this time at the sensor array on his damaged arm. "We cheated when we learned to use tools while stronger animals tried to kill us with claws and teeth." Another shot, targeting the cooling vents on his back. "We cheated when we learned to work together instead of fighting alone." A third shot perfectly placed to hit a power coupling she had spotted earlier. "We cheated when we learned to think our way out of problems instead of just using brute force." Vexthul was slowing down now. Multiple systems were failing, and his perfect mechanical coordination was falling apart. He swung his massive fist at Sarah, but she ducked under it easily. "You want to know the difference between us?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying clearly across the silent arena. "You were built to be perfect. I was built to survive. And survival means using every advantage you can find." She pulled out her last grenade, but instead of throwing it, she attached it to her sword. The blade began to glow with energy. "Your people conquered the galaxy by being stronger than everyone else," she continued, circling Vexthul like a predator stalking wounded prey. "But you never learned what to do when strength wasn't enough." Vexthul lunged at her with his good arm, but his damaged leg betrayed him. He stumbled, and Sarah was there. Her energy-charged blade found the gap in his neck armor, the one weak spot in his defenses that she had been studying for the entire fight. The sword didn't just cut through the cables and wires. It severed the connection between his cybernetic parts and his organic brain. Vexthul the Destroyer, the unstoppable killing machine, collapsed like a broken puppet. The arena was so quiet that Sarah could hear her own breathing echoing off the walls. Billions of beings across the galaxy stared in shock at the impossible sight. The greatest warrior in Zephyrian history lay motionless at the feet of a human woman who shouldn't have lasted 5 seconds. Sarah stood over Vexthul's body, not celebrating, not gloating. She looked tired, sad even. "You could have been so much more," she said quietly, "but you forgot how to grow. How to change. How to be anything except what you were built to be. In the viewing box, Kethvar rose from his throne, his crystal face twisted with rage. This combat is invalid. She used trickery. Deception. That is not honorable warfare. Sarah looked up at him through the transparent walls of the arena. Honor? She asked. You want to talk about honor? Your empire has enslaved entire civilizations. You've wiped out species that refuse to bow down to you. You've turned warriors into machines and called it improvement. Her voice grew stronger, carrying to every viewing station in the galaxy. If using my brain instead of just my muscles is dishonorable, then I'm proud to be dishonorable. If adapting to my enemy's tactics is cheating, then every human who ever lived was a cheater. And if that's what it takes to protect my people, then I'll cheat every day for the rest of my life. Kethavar's 4 eyes blazed with fury. The law clearly states that single combat determines the outcome, interrupted the stone being who had confirmed the ancient rule. The human has won by the ancient laws. The Zephyrian Empire's claim on Earth is void, but Sarah wasn't done. She reached into her armor and pulled out a small device, holding it up for all to see. This has been broadcasting everything, she said. Not just to Earth, but to every human ship. Every human settlement. Every human who's been hiding in the dark corners of your empire. Kethavar's face went from angry to confused to terrified in the space of a few seconds. You see, Sarah continued, this was never about one fight. This was about sending a message. Every human in the galaxy now knows that Zephyrians can be beaten. Every enslaved world now knows that the unstoppable empire can be stopped. She smiled, and for the first time since entering the arena, it was not a kind smile. The real fight is just beginning. The moment Sarah's words finished echoing through the arena, alarms began screaming across Zephyrian space. Kethavar's communication device lit up with urgent messages. His 4 hands moved frantically, trying to process the flood of emergency reports coming from every corner of his empire. The crystal plates of his armor had lost their glow, and for the first time in his 1,000-year life he looked afraid. Impossible, he whispered, reading the reports. This cannot be happening. But it was happening. Across 3,000 star systems, the Zephyrian Empire was under attack, not from fleets of human warships, but from something far more dangerous. Ideas. Hope. The knowledge that giants could fall. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, still holding the broadcasting device. She could see the panic spreading through the alien audience as they received their own reports from across the galaxy. What have you done? Kethavar demanded, his voice cracking like breaking crystal. I told you, Sarah replied calmly. Humans are good at surviving. And sometimes, survival means making sure your enemy can't threaten you again. The first detailed report came through on the main communication system. A Zephyrian admiral's voice, distorted by static and fear, filled the arena. War Prime, this is Admiral Zethkar of the 5th Fleet. We are under attack by human forces near the Vega system. They came out of nowhere. They know our shield frequencies. They're using our own weapons against us. Request immediate. The transmission cut to static. Another voice, this one from a different sector. Command Station Vorthak reporting massive systems failure. Human infiltrators have taken control of our defense grid. They're turning our own cannons on our ships. How did they get past our... Static again. Sarah watched Kethavar's face as more reports came in. Each one told the same story. Human forces emerging from hiding places throughout Zephyrian space. Human agents activating sleeper programs in Zephyrian computers. Human-controlled alien ships turning their weapons on their former masters. You've been planning this for years, Kethavar said, his voice barely above a whisper. Decades, Sarah corrected. Ever since your scouts first found Earth. Did you really think we would just sit and wait for you to decide our fate? Humans don't work that way. She gestured to the viewing screens showing chaos across the Empire. While you were building bigger ships and stronger warriors, we were learning, studying your technology, infiltrating your systems, placing our people in positions where they could do the most damage when the time came. The truth was even more devastating than the attacks themselves. For 50 years, while the Zephyrians had dismissed humans as primitives barely worthy of notice, human agents had been working throughout their empire, scientists studying alien technology, engineers learning to build hidden transmitters, Soldiers training in secret bases carved out of asteroids. Your people are so proud, Sarah continued, so certain of your superiority. You never thought to look for the maintenance worker with human DNA, the cargo loader who asked too many questions about your defense systems, the translator who remembered everything she heard in your war councils. A new voice came over the communications, this one from the Zephyrian homeworld itself. War Prime, the capital is under attack. Somehow humans have taken control of the orbital defense platforms. They're demanding the immediate release of all enslaved worlds or they'll... The transmission ended in an explosion that lit up the viewing screen. Kethvar staggered back from the communication panel as if it had struck him physically. Our homeworld. They're attacking our homeworld. Not attacking, Sarah said. Liberating. Every world your empire has enslaved is rising up right now. Every species you've conquered is fighting for its freedom, and they're not fighting alone. The scope of it was becoming clear now. This wasn't just a human rebellion. It was a galaxy-wide revolution, coordinated and planned down to the smallest detail. Every oppressed world had been contacted. Every resistance group had been equipped and trained. Every weakness in the Zephyrian Empire had been mapped and exploited. You used our own pride against us, Kethavar said, understanding beginning to dawn in his ancient eyes. We used everything against you, Sarah replied. Your pride, your predictable tactics, your belief that might makes right. But most of all, we used your greatest weakness. Which is? Sarah pointed to Vexthol's motionless body. You stopped learning. You became so powerful that you forgot how to grow. You built the perfect empire, the perfect military, the perfect warriors. And because it was perfect, you never thought it could be improved. The reports kept coming in, each one worse than the last for the Zephyrians. Their fleets were surrendering or being destroyed. Their command centers were going dark. Their slave worlds were declaring independence. Humans never stop learning, Sarah continued. We never stop adapting. When we found out about your empire, we didn't just prepare to fight you. We prepared to become you, to think like you, to use your own strength against you. An alien voice spoke up from the viewing stands. It was the jellyfish creature that had mocked humanity earlier. How many of you are there? How many human agents? Sarah smiled. Every human is an agent. Every human ship that visits a Zephyrian world carries people trained to blend in, to learn, to prepare. We've been studying you for 50 years. How long have you been studying us? The silence that followed answered her question. You looked at humans and saw weakness, Sarah said. Short lives, fragile bodies, primitive technology. You never looked deeper. You never saw that our weakness is also our strength. She gestured to the chaos on the viewing screens. We live short lives, so we learn fast. We have fragile bodies, so we build tools to make us stronger. We start with primitive technology, so we're not afraid to change it, improve it, adapt it. Kethvar was reading a new report, his hands shaking. They have our codes. All of them. How? 50 years of patient infiltration, Sarah said. 50 years of your own people teaching us how your systems work. You were so confident in your superiority that you never thought to hide anything from us. After all, what could weak little humans do with Zephyrian technology? The answer was on every screen around them. Human-controlled Zephyrian ships were systematically destroying the Empire's military infrastructure. Human agents were broadcasting freedom calls to every enslaved world. Human-trained resistance fighters were rising up across 1,000 systems. This is genocide, Kethvar said, his voice hollow. You're destroying our entire civilization. Sarah's expression hardened. Your civilization was built on the bones of every species you conquered. You want to talk about genocide? Ask the Altarians. Oh, wait. You can't. You wiped them out for refusing to surrender. Ask the Deltans. No, you enslaved their children and turned them into soldiers. She stepped closer to the viewing window that separated the arena from Kethvar's box. You made the rules, War Prime. You said that might makes right. You said that the strong have the right to rule the weak. Well, congratulations. Today you learned that humans are stronger than you thought. The final report came in from a human voice, speaking perfect Zephyrian. Sarah, this is Admiral Martinez aboard the captured dreadnought Eternal Victory. All primary targets have been secured. The Zephyrian fleet is surrendering. The homeworld is under our control. Kethvar collapsed into his throne, the weight of 10 million years of empire crashing down around him. It's over. Yes, Sarah said. It is. The Zephyrian Empire is finished. But you know what? Humans believe in mercy. Surrender now, and your people can live. Not as rulers, but as equals. Choose. The War Prime looked at her with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. What happens if I refuse? Sarah's smile was colder than the space between stars. Then you'll learn what humans do to species that threaten our survival. And trust me, you won't like the lesson. Kethvar chose poorly. The War Prime's final words to the galaxy were broadcast from his crystal throne. The Zephyrian Empire will never bow to inferior species. We would rather die as conquerors than live as equals. Within hours, those words became his epitaph. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the captured Zephyrian flagship as the final phase of the human plan unfolded. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Half were human, half were aliens from the species the Zephyrians had enslaved. All of them shared the same grim determination. Status report, Sarah ordered. Admiral Martinez, a gray-haired man who had spent 30 years preparing for this day, consulted his displays. Zephyrian homeworld defenses are down. Their government has refused all surrender offers. Military command is ordering a fight to the death. Sarah nodded. She had expected this. The Zephyrians were too proud to accept defeat, too rigid to adapt to their new reality. In a way, she felt sorry for them. They were about to learn the hardest lesson in the galaxy. Extinction was the price of refusing to change. Begin Phase 7, she commanded. Across Zephyrian space, the systematic destruction began. It wasn't random violence or revenge killing. It was something far more terrifying. The complete and methodical erasure of a civilization. Every Zephyrian military base was targeted and destroyed. Every government building was reduced to rubble. Every shipyard, every weapons factory, every center of power was eliminated with surgical precision. The humans had learned well from their teachers. They used Zephyrian technology better than the Zephyrians themselves. They turned the Empire's own weapons against its creators with devastating efficiency. But the real weapon wasn't technology. It was something the Zephyrians had never understood. Unity. While the Zephyrian Empire had ruled through fear and dominance, humans had built alliances. Every species the Zephyrians had enslaved now fought alongside humanity. The snake-like Serpentis used their infiltration skills to sabotage Zephyrian supply lines. The rock creatures of Petros used their incredible strength to tear apart enemy fortifications. Even the gentle flower people contributed by providing medical aid to human forces. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting not just humans, but half the galaxy. Species they had dismissed as weak or worthless proved to be formidable allies when given hope and proper leadership. Sir, reported a young human officer, Zephyrian High Command is attempting to activate their planet-killer weapons. They're targeting Earth. Sarah's expression didn't change. Countermeasures? Already in place, ma'am. Our infiltrators disabled those systems 3 years ago. The weapons will target Zephyrian colonies instead. It was perfect poetic justice. The Zephyrians' final attempt to destroy humanity would instead destroy their own worlds. Even in defeat, their pride made them their own worst enemy. On the main screen, Sarah watched the Zephyrian homeworld as the last of its orbital defenses fell. The crystal cities that had stood for millions of years were crumbling. The great towers that had touched the sky were falling. The planet that had birthed an empire was dying. Ma'am, said another officer, this one a former Zephyrian slave whose people had been freed just days before. We're receiving surrender offers from individual Zephyrian units. Should we accept them? Sarah considered this. Part of her wanted to show mercy. Humans were supposed to be better than their enemies. But then she thought about the billions of beings who had died under Zephyrian rule. She thought about entire species wiped out for the crime of resistance. She thought about children taken from their families and turned into soldiers. No, she said quietly. Kethvar spoke for his entire species when he refused surrender. They chose extinction over equality. We're just giving them what they wanted. The bridge fell silent except for the soft beeping of instruments and the distant explosions visible on the main screen. It took 3 days for the Zephyrian Empire to die completely. 3 days of systematic destruction as human-led forces eliminated every trace of Zephyrian military power. 3 days of desperate last stands as proud warriors discovered that pride was a poor defense against superior tactics and overwhelming force. 3 days of watching an entire civilization collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. When it was over, not a single Zephyrian military vessel remained functional. Not a single government official survived. Not a single world remained under their control. The species that had ruled the galaxy for 10 million years was extinct, wiped out as thoroughly as if they had never existed at all. Sarah stood in the arena of stars one last time, now converted into a memorial. Where Vex Thul had died, a simple plaque marked the spot. The words were written in every language of the galaxy. Here fell the last champion of tyranny. Here died the illusion of inevitable power. Here began the age of equals. Representatives from 1,000 freed worlds had come to pay their respects. Not to the Zephyrians, but to the idea that oppression could be defeated, that the mighty could fall, that everyone, no matter how small or weak, had the right to be free. Commander Chen, said the stone being who had confirmed the ancient law that started everything. The Galactic Council is ready to elect you as the new supreme leader. All member worlds have agreed. Sarah shook her head. Humans don't want to rule the galaxy. We just wanted to make sure no one could rule us. She gestured to the empty space where Kethvar's viewing box had been. The Zephyrians made the mistake of thinking that strength meant the right to dominate others. We won't make the same mistake. Then what will you do? Sarah smiled, but it was a warmer smile than the galaxy had seen from her in years. We'll go home. We'll live our short lives and raise our children and explore the stars, and if anyone ever again tries to claim that might makes right, we'll be there to remind them what happened to the last species that believed that. She picked up Vexthal's weapon from where it had been mounted as part of the memorial. The massive energy cannon looked impossibly large in her human hands, but she hefted it easily. It was hers now, a trophy and a warning. The galaxy is free, she announced to the assembled representatives. See that it stays that way. As Sarah walked away from the memorial, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber, the aliens watched her go in respectful silence. They had learned something important about humans in these past few days. Humans were indeed weak and short-lived and fragile. They were also the most dangerous species in the galaxy when they decided you needed to die. The age of empire was over. The age of freedom had begun. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, human ships continued their patrols, making sure that the lesson of the Zephyrians was never forgotten. The strong could rule the weak only as long as the weak allowed it. Humanity had decided they would never allow it again. In the memorial, Vexthal's final words were inscribed beneath the plaque. She was outmatched. Below that, in smaller letters, were Sarah's words from that day. I was never meant to match you. I was meant to exceed you. The galaxy had learned what those words really meant. They meant extinction for anyone who forgot them.